Hello and welcome to the Sunday Standard News Review. My name is Mogapi, and today we are joined by the leader of the Alliance for Progressives, Mr. Ndaba Gaolathe, with whom we'll be talking a variety of issues on the economy, politics, but also the general state of the country, especially with the constitutional review coming. Welcome, Gaolathe. Can you briefly tell us what do you have as the Alliance Progressives, as the country, Parliament is now talking about the state of the nation? What is your view about the state of the nation today?
Hello, Mogapi, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
I believe we believe at the AP that the country is at a crossroads. We have a country that has tremendous potential for its people, but it's failing to realize that potential. There is no reason, given Botswana's resources, given Botswana's history, given Botswana's people, there is no reason why the economy should continue to be stagnant for so many years. There's no reason why the unemployment rate should continue to be high, including unemployment of graduates. There's no reason why we should be having equity problems, so much wealth concentrated on a few people. There's no reason why we should continue being a mono economy when we know that in order to sustain the lives of our people, we need to diversify. There is no reason why a small country like Botswana shouldn't be an exemplar in terms of the institutions that we build.
But tell me, where did it go wrong, or when did we really start to derail? Because there are so many interventions that have been made, but very few have really borne any fruits. If you talk about economic diversification, for example, there's not much really to write home about. But where did we really go wrong? Because there would have been a time when you guys were also with the ruling party.
Well, Botswana may have done a lot of refinements and fixing here and there, but I don't think we were able over the years to do quite the fundamental things. Let me be specific. After Botswana attained its independence in the 60s, Botswana was struggling as a country. And when we struck fortune with diamonds in the early 70s, a lot of the emphasis was in building the infrastructure. So the scale with which Botswana built the infrastructure relative to the size of the economy then was in many ways transformative. Even when you look at the numbers, when you look at the quantum of the roads, the hospitals, the schools that Botswana was able to build, in a sense, was transformational. But that was a period of about 2 decades or so. The manner in which that was managed, at least initially, there were things that Botswana was able to do out of the box, which other countries were not able to do. I'll give an example. If you look at the decision of the government of the day to seek a joint venture with a private entity at a time when it was almost embarrassing for an African country to go into a joint venture with a private entity. Everybody was nationalizing.
Is that joint venture still necessary today?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that. But my point is, initially there were some initial steps that Botswana took that were out of the box, that were progressive, and that contributed to what initially looked like a transformative journey. But along the way, as a country, as a leadership, we were not able to redefine, we were not able to refine, we were not able to do the next step, the next stage, the next phase of Botswana's development. If you look how far back that was then, right? We haven't done as a country, for instance, for argument's sake, we haven't done anything like Botswana since. Yeah, we haven't done anything transformational since. We haven't done something similar to Botswana in a different sector, right? We haven't built any serious infrastructure. A lot of the serious infrastructure, the roads, the schools, everything was done in the 70s and the 80s.
That's right.
We haven't done any of the major infrastructure. And this time, by major infrastructure, if we were serious about the next stage of transformation, we were supposed to have been in the lead, at least by African standards, by building the modern type of infrastructure like underground oil pipelines that link different parts of Africa. We have been talking about building rail for how many years now? For more than 30 years. We have been talking about building rail to Mozambique, to Namibia. We haven't been able to do those major infrastructure. We haven't been able to build serious water infrastructure, not just for
But
consumption.
the key question for Motswana at home would be to say, why not? Why haven't we done that? Is it lack of political will, or there's no money, or what could be the reason?
It's a combination of factors. There's been a lot of money. I attribute the number of factors. I think there hasn't been a political will. I believe that at some stage not the right people have been put in the right places. Some people say there isn't enough money. There's lots of money. In fact, much of the infrastructure, you don't need public funds to do it. You need the skills and the foresight to be able to put together, to coordinate financial structures in order to build this infrastructure. But also I attribute it to the failure to adapt our institutions. We were supposed, every nation is supposed to continue refining itself. When you look at our constitutional order, for instance.
You are a politician now, thinker. Just give us a brief overview of the Botswana's current reserves now. Has the reserves been stagnant, going down, or there's basically nothing to talk about?
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact figure now, but I will tell you what the issues are. Reserves are measured in terms of the number of months that a country would be able to sustain itself. Traditionally, over the last more than 20 years, Botswana has had foreign reserves worth about 18 months of import cover. In the last 2 years, that has fallen drastically. I don't know what the figure is now, but I know that at some stages it had fallen to less than half that amount. Yes.
So what would you say then are the big issues facing the current Minister of Finance insofar as, number one, those particular reserves we are talking about, but also the general economy? What are the immediate issues that would be keeping her awake at night?
Wow, she's got a lot of immediate issues. Botswana traditionally has focused on the macro issues, has concerned itself with inflation, concerned itself on import cover. at the expense, I would say, we have neglected the microeconomic issues. And in fact, those are the most important issues. And I'll be specific. And they are immediate. The parastatals that are at the core of building any economy are in a mess. If you are going to be able to attract and sustain investment, you need to ensure that utilities, electricity is inexpensive, water is inexpensive compared to other countries. But if you look at our utility parastatals, they are bloated. Botswana Power Corporation, at least when I was in Parliament, the cost structure was off the roof. The government couldn't keep up with financing their deficits. If you look at the technology trends now, how the technology has changed, and the price for producing electricity compared to what it was 5 or 10 years ago is much less. So we are failing to adapt to that. If we were able as a country to very quickly transition to independent power producers, not just in solar, we would be able to cut the price of power, and that would drastically change how much our investment potential. Same for water. If you look at still microeconomic issues, if you look at parastatals like Botswana Meat Commission, and you compare with how efficient our neighbors, including Namibia, is, it makes a huge difference in terms of the beef sector and how the beef sector is able to develop. The monopoly legislation is still in place, so we are very much bottlenecked in terms of how we are able to develop different sectors. But also, if you look at how we aggregate, Botswana is a small economy. You are not going to be able to initiate or erect multinationals based on our market size. You have to find a very wise way of aggregating what different entrepreneurs and putting it together in order to scale up and create multinationals. For example, just to explain, because I think these things need to be explained. If you look at beef sector, for example, the reason why you had the BMC in the first place was so that individual farmers can flow to one cooperative and sell as one big company. The same should apply in arable agriculture, in crop agriculture, in technology, in food processing. We are not at that stage as a country. Government is not coming to the party in terms of facilitating our aggregation in order to create, on the basis of the entrepreneurs, multinationals that can build our economy.
And while we are talking about those few points, something crossed my mind. Can you just clarify, were you ever given an opportunity to serve as Minister of Finance?
Well, there was a discussion about joining government.
At what level?
Cabinet.
Cabinet.
Yes.
Was a position mentioned in the discussion?
No.
No. And you declined, or you were not offered what you wanted?
No, it wasn't a question of what I wanted. I felt that anything that had, to me, had conditions. If I was to serve in government, my understanding that it would translate into leaving the movement and basically turning my back on the vision for the
Was
new
that
Botswana.
an assumption by yourselves, or you were categorically told if you leave the APA, you'll get an opportunity to serve?
No, I'm not making assumptions. I think it's just that I'm reluctant to go into detail. But I'm not making
let's move
assumptions.
on. Can you just try to paint a picture for us how Botswana would be like without diamonds? And I'm asking this question because diamonds is very clear, number one. They will be coming to an end at one point. But even if they are there, they are no longer being bought the way they used to be. So we might come to a time when we are no longer as a country able to sell diamonds. And how would that be for Botswana?
You know, diamonds were both a blessing and a curse. They were a curse in the sense that with diamonds, it meant that immediately government had a lot of, well, let me start with the blessing. The blessing was that immediately government was able to have the resources to build the infrastructure. But it was a curse in the sense that as a country, we then neglected the idea of aggressively developing industry. And the only way to develop a nation, a great nation, in which in the end ordinary people have sustainable livelihoods, is to build a diversified economy. Sectors like manufacturing are good in many respects. First, they pay well generally. Second, sectors like manufacturing have permeating effects on the economy. When you develop a plant, a manufacturing plant, the ripple effect is that then you need a whole litany of subsectors that need to service that manufacturing plant. You need engineering firms, you need technology firms, you need food firms. You find that a lot more than the mining sector, the manufacturing sector, by its nature, has a tremendously positive effect on the level of incomes and on the level of diversification into other sectors that are good for any nation.
Let's talk about public debt. There are those who have the view that to significantly going to borrow from World Bank, but there are also those who are saying, given the country's position, the ability to pay has been significantly reduced. About that debate.
I think it's an important debate. A number of issues there. Economies are different. Developed economies like the United States and Germany can absorb a lot of debt, and it wouldn't affect the economy as such negatively. Mm-hmm. It would in some respects. In the case of small economies, debt does affect. Now, I have always felt that Botswana borrows under its capacity, doesn't borrow enough. But I do not believe that Botswana needs to borrow from the IMF and from all these financial institutions. Mm-hmm. I believe that Botswana needs to put to bear its thinking hat and find ways of funding and structuring its funding for its mega projects. I have said before in Parliament, in public, and to yourself, that what Botswana needs to do, it needs to develop its independent, its IPP capacity. It needs to develop a mechanism where it goes into joint ventures with the private sector, funding these infrastructure projects and these infrastructure projects being able to fund themselves. And there are so many of them. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a dual carriageway north-south of Botswana. It can build itself. The railway, it can build itself. The oil pipelines, they can build themselves. A huge continental airport in the likes of Dubai can build itself. But we do not have the capacity. Last, there was a small unit within the Ministry of Finance, which was supposed to develop these private-public partnerships, these triple Ps. The unit to date, every year, we're looking for experts. We're looking for experts. If you look at land servicing, we are far behind where we should be as a country. There's no reason why this country cannot develop swaths of land for ordinary citizens. I mean, Singapore has been able to house more than 87% of its people affordably, right? There's no reason why we cannot service land for potential investors. I do not believe we need to borrow money for that. Yes, we can borrow money, but there are other reasons why Botswana should borrow money, and not from the IMF. Botswana can borrow from financial markets to also develop the financial services, the financial markets.
Let's move now to the political phase of the interview, and I'll start by asking you, the constitutional review debate is raging, and President Massey has said he will be appointing the commissioners next month, December. So how, if you're talking for AP here, do you receive that? Have you been consulted how the process is going to look like going forward?
The AP has not been consulted. Nobody that I've talked to in any of the political institutions or the labor unions or even the NGOs, none of the people that I've talked to have mentioned any government consulting them on the constitution. No.
So what are the risks? I mean, we now have a president saying he will, and I assume it will be a unilateral decision for him who he appoints and who he does not. What are the risks?
Oh, the risks are huge. You know, I think people underestimate the effect that the constitutional order, the constitutional architecture has on the future of the country. It affects the culture of institutions. It affects the dreams and the beliefs and the incentives of ordinary citizens. It affects our ability to bring out the best in our people. And getting it right is everything. And if you allow me, I can talk to the Constitution, why it is so important and why it affects so much. There is a prevailing assumption, and I've heard it in the conversations in radio and across the political spectrum, the assumption that there's a lot of emphasis on curtailing presidential powers, and that seems to be a lot of emphasis. There's a lot more to a good constitutional architecture than curtailing the president's powers. In fact, I would argue that curtailing the president's powers is not as important as empowering all the arms of government to be able, one, to pursue their mandate with excellence, two, to provide a check and balance against each other. If you look at, for example, our parliament, our legislature, it is extremely stunted. a legislature anywhere in the world, for it to be effective, it needs to have what is called the power of the purse. And the power of the purse means literally having a say. Having a say on the allocation of resources, particularly governmental resources. In Botswana, the executive has the say. The executive plans, the executive projects. All the executive does is to go to Parliament and ask Parliament, almost with a gun to the neck, yes or no. And there is no way that the legislature can put the executive to check if the legislature does not have the institutions, the structure, its own planning capacity and capability, its own economic analysis and projection capacity, so that as the legislature at any given time has a counter-national development plan based on reason and research, has a counter-budget to the government, has a counter-allocation. That is important. That is an important check and balance, the allocation of resources, but based on expertise. Another important check and balance is, yes, the president may have the powers to appoint appoint and deploy key people to key roles in government. That power is fine, no problem with it, but it needs to be checked by a confirmatory process. There has to be a check and balance where these candidates are interviewed publicly, so that whenever a president appoints people, he or she appoints people that he knows would have a vision that the people of Botswana would align with. That person must have the competence that people will identify with. And it would cause whoever is in power to appoint and to deploy people closer to merit, closer to meritocracy than otherwise. When you look at institutions such as the Auditor General, which are supposed to, institutions such as the Directorate of Crimes, they all report to the Office of the President, they report to the executive branch of government. It is important to have them independent so that they are able to make decisions, they are able to go about their business without feeling that the executive is on its neck.
The AP is part of the opposition political parties that are currently talking to each other going into 2024 general elections. Can you tell us where you are on that process? Number one, what kind of model the AP is approaching the negotiations with? But more even before then, can you just tell us, do you consider yourself as a power broker in these talks between the BCP and the Botswana National Front?
Well, let me start, Mogapi, by saying I think it's important that at a time like this, when our institutions are imploding, when we don't seem to be having a direction in terms of developing our economy, I think it's important that people from all walks of life, not just political organizations, find a meeting point, find a way of collaborating with each other. And as the AP, we believe that there is need for us to seek and search ways that we can collaborate specifically with other political organizations, but not just political organizations, by the way. We do not believe that there is only one model. We believe that, specifically, our model of, there's talk of, I've read this in the newspapers, there's talk of the AP joining the UDC. There is no such talk within the Alliance for Progressives, I want to be very clear about that. There are no plans to join the UDC. There is no intention to join the UDC because there has been an internal process and consultation. And the inclination of our people across the breadths and lengths of this country is that we need to find a way of working, of collaborating with the UDC without being inside the UDC.
So in short, because you have a way of not getting into the answers the way I would have wanted, but in short, you are saying there's a stalemate.
I wouldn't call it a stalemate.
But there are differences currently with regard.
Well, there are certainly differences in approach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is a secret, and it's understandable that the UDC favors a model in which all other political parties, AP and BPF, join the UDC. That is their model. What I'm saying, I'm not saying there's an impasse. What I'm saying is that there are grounds for us to be discussing and finding each other.
And what are the prospects for an agreement ultimately being reached, at least going to 2024?
Well, I have this naive faith that in 2024 there will be some form of arrangement. What I cannot say and what I cannot commit is whether that form or that arrangement would be in the manner that I have been reading in the newspapers, or in a manner that is being assumed that one party is joining another. No, but I don't know anyone in the AP who is not eager to find some form of arrangement with all political formations in Botswana.
And lastly, if we were to ask you to grade President Massey's performance so far out of a score of 10, and 10 being the best performance there is, and 0 or 1 being the poorest performance, how would you grade him?
You do know that I don't grade individuals.
I do that because I can see you don't want to answer the question.
I will grade his government.
Mm-hmm.
And he will have to take responsibility of the grading of his government.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that I'm not able to give him his government, anything more than a 0. Yeah.
And with that, we have come to the end of this interview. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.